Hey friends and family, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com, and this is not the Hieronymus Bosch video that I said was coming next. I inadvertently told an untruth, and the reason for the untruth is because the Hieronymus Bosch has not yet been delivered. And in the meanwhile, I saw on my feed that Mascha released her 5 favorite magicians, and she has that tarot challenge that I would like to participate in with her. If you want to do it, it's hashtag, I think, toptarottrumps. I think that's what it's called. So, it's unrealistic for me to go through every single one of my decks for every single one of the Triumph cards, right? So I don't remember like every single solitary Triumph card, and which is my favorite. But there are some that interest me for certain reasons, not necessarily because I think it's my favorite, but because I think it's an interesting portrayal of the subject matter. So the cards I have chosen are in no particular order of preference. The first one I'll show you is the Marilyn Tarot from 1865. This one was published by Giordano Berti, so 1865. And what we have here is a cobbler who's quite unlike the bachelors or il bagattos, right, of previous year's cards. Now we have, which is kind of interesting to me, a rendition of a number 1 card as a creator. He's a cobbler. You see that? So, the occultists have already come and expressed the, number 1 card as a magician with lofty power and stuff like that. But remember, he's only the first number in the sequence, which means that he had extremely low social standing, right? So it's interesting for me to see how they interpreted that in the card. So they kind of well, this is only my own view. This is not necessarily what's ever been written about this. But in my opinion, what it appears to me is that they became aware of the occultists' idea of a lofty magician who is a creator. But the Italians are true to, well, he's on the lowest rung of that ladder. So they have him be a cobbler who I believe probably was at the lower end of the social spectrum regarding, power in the community or standing in the community. So he looks like a friendly enough guy, and he looks like an honest kind of guy. But socially, he's low on the rung. So I think that's interesting. So it sort of almost seems like a combination of someone who's a creator, who has creative abilities, but he's still being honored as being low on the social order. Another card in keeping with that, and there's 2 actually, are the one by Della Rocca, the Tarocco Serafino, this one by Il Meneghello, and then the Ancient Italian Tarot, which was modeled after this one, right? So this one came 1835-ish, this one 1885 or something like that. So this one was modeled after this one. Now, here, again, he's some kind of cobbler, because there seems to be a shoe form on the table. He's drinking wine, and this one in particular seems to have a little bit of a sinister face. So he's still in keeping with the cobbler, being the low rung of the magician, being the low rung of a creator, on the social order. And this one almost makes you wonder, like, will I get my change back? Did he use shoddy materials to fix my shoe? Right? So this one kind of always made me wonder, is he on the up and up? So I always thought these 2 were kind of interesting in regard to their social sequencing as number 1. The Italians never lost sight of the fact that number 1 was low on the totem pole. Low. The Fool, who was given no number, I'm sure I've discussed this many times, as I have discussed many times, the magician being number one, and my disagreement with the occultists who give him, by the time we get to Rider-Waite-Smith, he's like this magus, this magus, and he's got all these powers and stuff, but he really doesn't, because he's still number one. So he has less powers than anyone else in that tarot deck, except for maybe the Fool, who has almost all the power because he was an excuse, right? He was a random wild card. So really, the number one card has less power than any of the cards, right? So that's why I've never seen him as anything other than the low man on the totem pole, so to speak, either as a somebody who conned, a con man, or as someone who was just on the low on the social throngs of the social order for reasons I mentioned. Now, two other cards that I pick for the magician that I think are significant are the Rosenwald, this one by Marco Benedetti, because this is like 1500s, so it's an early card. It's an early deck, rather. And it portrays someone who's probably a con man, right? Coming through town with his sleight of hand tricks. And then the Budapest, this one by Sullivan Hisman, where he has an audience. And we've seen in recent videos that I've done instances where there's an audience for both the Fool and the Magician. And so sometimes in the early tarot decks, those two cards kind of got confused with one another, I think, or they shared similarities. They're both transient. But here we have clearly somebody who's doing sleight of hand tricks for an audience. And this is one, again, from the early 1500s. So it's an early, it's an early mass-produced deck, as is this. Early mass-produced. Remember, the oldest surviving cards we have that predate these cards are cards for the nobility or for wealthy families. And so they would have cost a lot of money, and so they took care to take care of them, right? They preserved them. They took care to pass them down from generation to generation. These survive by miracle, probably because they were found in books that were being rebinded. And probably that's how, I'm not saying specifically these two, but I think it's probably the case. I think I remember that some of these older mass-produced decks were really only salvaged because they were the rejects that were printed that were not used for a deck were used to bind books. And then the last one that I've chosen is only because I recently looked at this deck the other day, and I was reminded how some of the cards are pretty cool. And this one is the Bosch Tarot by Lo Scarabeo. And the guy with the tin hat. Now it's unclear. I mean, he's part con man with the wand to distract the audience from what he's doing. He's not playing with a full deck because he's got the tin hat on. And I guess, maybe it had a similar connotation back in the day. We talk about tinfoil hats. Now, this deck was produced in 90-something. And the image itself, I don't know if Bosch ever created an image like that, or if Anasov, the artist's name, Antanisov, forgive me for saying his name incorrectly, which I'm sure I did. But if that was his thing, but still it predates our common usage of the tin hat. So I kind of get a kick out of this one. And he has a dog. And then when I was going through the Bosch deck to get the Magician, I saw this card. Had I seen this card when we did the Fools, I probably would have picked this as one of my favorite Fools because it's whimsical. We get the point, we understand what it is, and it's a reference to a medieval artist. So I would have probably added that in the full one. So here are my 5 for the Magician. The Perrin, the Bosch, the Soprafino, or the Ancient Italian. One is copied from the other, but this one's face, I think, is a little more sinister. The Rosenwald by Marco Benedetti, and then the Budapest by Sullivan Hismans at Tarot Sheet Revival. So not necessarily because I like them the most, but because I think that they're interesting in their portrayal of the subject of the number 1 card. Until next time, friends, peace and stay well. And do Mascha's challenge. You know, like I said, I think it's #toptarottrumps. Until next time, peace and stay well.